Welcome to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.
Welcome to another episode of Slackin' Off. I'm your host, Brady Slack. And today, I've got someone really important to me on this podcast, someone who has become a very great confidant, someone who's become a very good friend in a short amount of time, and someone who I look up to, not just in the entrepreneurial space. There's lots of friends and mentors that I have in the entrepreneur space, but someone who I look up to as a dad, someone who I look up to as a man of God, a child of God, someone who is a leader in their respective community. And so not even in an introduction, but more as of a thank you for talking with me for a little bit. Cody Jefferson, thanks for being on.
Come on, man. I'm excited to be here. We're gonna have a good conversation, and I appreciate those kind words, man. One of my favorite things about having the opportunity to serve people in the capacity that we both do, obviously respective to our verticals, is getting to meet people
Yeah.
and getting to meet such a variety of people. And sometimes those relationships just click, and you're like, we're going to be good friends. We're just going to be good friends, and that's how it's going to be. And I instantly felt that, with you. So it's really good to be here, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's kind. We were talking a little bit before we started to record this episode, and Cody's like, if you're just going to talk about my story, if you're going to talk about my, my pitfalls, I don't even want to talk, right? So for those of you who don't know who Cody Jefferson is, I'm going to give you just a 2 minute, maybe not even that. It'll be a 30-second synopsis. Cody Jefferson is someone who you're a coach, right?
Mhm.
That like you coach men, but on top of that, you invest into businesses. You're
Yep.
you're a board advisor. You're
Yep.
an entrepreneur. You are a business owner. You were in theology and church study and church leadership for a really long time, kind of before you entered into the business space. And that we'll kind of get into that, how that
Yeah.
transition led into what you're doing today, because there's a post that you made a couple of days ago that we talked about earlier that I want to highlight.
Yeah.
And if you don't, for those listening, if you don't know who Cody Jefferson is, I would highly recommend that you go listen to him, especially if you're a man in business. Go join his free Facebook group. I think there's 4,200, 4,300 members in
Yeah.
that Facebook group.
Yeah. Embrace the lion.
So go, yeah, Embrace the Lion is the Facebook group. It's free to join. I would highly recommend it. There's always live Facebook videos. Because as an entrepreneur, which we've highlighted in previous podcasts with other guests, especially as a male entrepreneur, sometimes it is a long and lonely road.
Mhm.
It can be hard. There's lots of really highs, and the lows can be really low. And so what I've found is it's nice to have people in your corner like Cody, to be able to converse with and be a friend with, and have that journey together. What has the impact of? Let's talk about the free Facebook group for a while, because I think there's a lot of value there that people can get from that. Why the free Facebook group, and what has been some of the value that you've seen for that?
Yeah. Well, and just to clarify, it's not about any skeletons or anything, listeners. It's just that I've been on a little over 400 podcasts now, and half of them ask the same question. So I'm like, if we're just going to ask the same questions, just have people go look up other podcasts, because
Go listen to
we
another
can only talk
podcast.
about my story so many times. Um, so in 2016, 17. I was still in ministry. So for those of you listening, I was in occupational ministry as a pastor for 13 years. In some ways, I still am. I just traded the pulpit for this platform. And um, about that time, so it was very easy back then, or it was more simple, I should say, to go viral. I was going viral very consistently, talking about leadership, talking about some of the frustration of purpose and potential as it relates to the church and it being not something to live up to, because I think we get really confused with the conversation of trying to live up to God's expectation versus living through a promise. I started talking about all of the complexities. Like 2015 into 16, I went through a divorce with my son's mom. No really great story there. Sorry. Just went through a divorce. And through my time in ministry, was really talking about some of the frustrations of of that experience. In the midst of that, I did go through a lot of trauma. I buried 8 family members and friends during that year, which was wild, and buried 5 other pastor friends in ministry over a 2-year period, who had all taken their own lives. So, like, there's just a lot of things that we're not talking about. So I just started talking about them, and it, dude, it started blowing up. Like, it was just going crazy. Now, again, it was far more simple to go viral back then. So I was just going viral a lot. And I thought, man, I've got to be able to have a place where with these guys, we can just talk about these things. And I didn't have an LLC, I didn't have an S corp, I didn't have anything. Like, I just had a Facebook profile.
Yeah.
I had no idea what it was to really. I wasn't starting a business at this point. I just started a free group, and I called it "Embrace the Lion" because in my head I'm like, we need to embrace one, the lion that's inside of us, and we're showing up like a domesticated house cat. Two, there's also a play on, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which was way too long for a Facebook URL and even longer for a website URL. So it just became
And
Embrace the
probably
Lion.
not like probably not something that a lot of people would have been interested in understanding either.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So the lion in and of itself, cool. You start putting, Christian ideology behind it. Now, all of a sudden, you're typecast in a particular role.
Yeah.
And so, it just started as getting these guys in. And so again, these posts were going viral, getting shared hundreds and thousands of times, and these guys just kept jumping in. And so we just started having the conversation of what is it to be a man? What is it to walk through trauma? What is it to want more while simultaneously being grateful for what you have? Because we were kind of taught the false binary that it's one or the other. Um, what does it mean to, for most of us, at least the audience that I resonate with, what does it mean to, like, kind of be naturally good at most things? And some people won't understand that, and it sounds arrogant and entitled and full of yourself. But really, like, when you're good at most things, it's can be paralyzing because there's so many directions you can go that you, and when you live under the presupposition that God has a plan for your life, it creates this manic experience of like, well, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to go down the wrong path, which leads to then not going down any path, or the law of the lid sets in and you can get by at 60%, not 100%. So you coast at that 60%, which creates this complacency inside of you because you're called for more, but nobody's really calling out that more in you, and you're getting by. And everybody thinks you're awesome. You're getting lots of pats on the back. So, by all intents and purposes, you should just be grateful and happy for what you have and where you are, but there's this internal wrestling inside of you. That's those are the conversations we address.
Yeah, so Ed Milet, I don't know if you've ever you know who Ed Milet is. Obviously, you've
I
spoken
do.
with him.
Yep.
Ed Milet talks a lot about a thermometer that everyone
Mhm,
has internally, and that thermometer is typically set at what your environment is around you. So
mhm.
I comment on this. Tell me what your thoughts are. Do you think some people don't get to their full potential because they turn down their thermometer to please those around them? Like, they don't want to make others upset, or they don't want to receive bad judgment from those around them when they do experience success. Is that part of it? I'm just genuinely curious what your experience is.
I it was sure, but I think it's a multitude of things. I think that environment certainly plays a role. Uh, you can't outgrow the pot that you're planted in, right? If you don't get transpotted.
Sure.
Also, I think that there are times in our life where if we're surrounded by the same people that we've been surrounded by our entire life, there is a law of the lid. And if everybody's earning the same and you're doing the same thing that you've been doing for 20 years, going to the same local bar, pounding them back and talking about the good old days, well, then for you to excel or to ascend beyond that, one, there's no real frame for it, so you haven't seen it before. Two, there's a fear that if I do, my friends are going to think that I'm judging them or I think I'm better than them, and I'm not better than them, so I'll just
Yeah.
stay where I'm at. There's also a fear of failure. Nobody really wants to fail at what they're doing and not be good at something. And again, when you're good at most things, it's easier just to camp out in the land of being good enough at most things than to really take a risk and lose. Because for many of us who are talented at a lot of things. Like we never really did fail. Academics come pretty easy, sports comes pretty easy, conversation comes pretty easy. I think so to fail at something, I don't know really what that is. So I'd rather camp out in the land of good enough. But it creates again this internal consternation and frustration because you know that there's more in the tank and you're not doing anything with it. But also, I'd have you consider that I don't. We talk a lot about full potential, and a lot of people, especially in my space, talk about this idea of reaching your full potential. I don't think you never do. Like, who quantifies and qualifies that?
Yeah.
There is never a space and time where your brain is like, you know what? Neuroplasticity, I'm kind of done with that. There's going to be no new synapse. There's going to be no new connections formed. I don't care about the environment you place yourself in, the people you surround yourself with, the mindset shifts that you create and cultivate, or the new habits that you adapt or let go of that no longer serve you. I've reached my capacity. This is as smart and as intelligent and as successful as you get. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. Okay. So that you're talking about that, and it kind of makes me think. Now, I'll preface this by saying this conversation, just due to the nature of who both of us are, what, there will be lots of reference to God, to spirituality. If that's not you, I would invite you to continue to listen because there will be lots of parallels to business, and that is how you and I
Mhm.
both operate. So I'm going to make the disclaimer only because who knows who's listening. I would invite you to continue to listen. um
Sure.
you make that comment, and I think about, like, in the Bible, the parable of the talents,
Yeah.
and I was listening to a podcast by Patrick Bet David today, and they were talking about income inequality. And it's funny enough, you and I had this conversation 2 or 3 weeks ago while we were in Phoenix and Paradise Valley about just the, like, what would happen in a general recession, and the people around us that maybe we care about who aren't at the same level as us, and then that separation aspect comes into play, and what's going to happen with those people, how can we help elevate them. But as you're talking about, like, gifts or talents or opportunities or abilities, it makes me think about the parable of the talents,
Yeah.
where, a certain number of talents is given to one person. They don't do anything with that talent, and then we find out that they lose that talent. One
Yeah.
person was given a few more talents, and they were multiplied, and then a third person was given a little bit more talents, and they were multiplied, right? I think,
Mhm.
at least this is my viewpoint, right? You've worked with far more men than I have in that capacity, but that parable of the talent is very form fitting for the conversation that we were having, the conversation that Patrick Bet David was having on his podcast with those talents. And I think where it comes into play is, I don't think either one of us will necessarily say that certain people have more ability than others.
Mhm.
Everyone has the ability to find something they're great at. It's just whether or
Yeah.
not you want to execute on that discovery journey.
Yeah, and everyone can learn to be great at things as well,
Yeah.
right? It's time and reps. Most, I would say that most aren't willing to create the margin and expand the capacity required. Right? You could be
Why?
a great guitar player. I mean, if you don't play right now, you could be a great guitar player.
Yeah.
It's just going to take time and it's going to take reps. You're going to suck for a while. Your hands are going to
Yeah.
hurt. You're going to have to improve your dexterity, right? You're going to have to learn a lot of really boring scales and chords, right? For those of you that are like might be seeing it, like I have a bunch of guitars behind me. I played guitar professionally for a decade. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of theory to learn. It's not fun. It's not just picking it up and playing, a slash solo.
Why? But why? Why don't people try? If there's a try aspect, why don't people try? Are they afraid?
Yeah.
Are they hesitant? Are they
Well, I
comfortable?
think fear comes, yeah, it's fear, but it comes in a lot of different packages, right? So some of it is a presupposition of already thinking that you're not good enough because that's what you were raised to believe. And so that's a belief. It doesn't mean it's true, But a belief is nothing more
Sure.
than a thought that we hold captive for long enough that it becomes a part of our subconscious reality. And our brain does all that it can to confirm that suspicion to be true. This is why we get into the same broken relationships. This is why we have problems in our physical health when we go through, dieting spurts and we try the next latest fad. It's because we've been told something and it becomes a belief that we hold on to. And so this is a perceptive struggle that I have, and people like me just struggle with this. Why is that true? Like, why does that have to be true? So there's that. There's also the fear of failing. We don't necessarily want to be bad at anything. And I think that's gotten exacerbated through culture as well, because we live in a very Amazon Prime, have anything in 2 days, instant
Everything is easy.
gratification, dopamine heavy. Yeah. Like, I don't have to have real friends. I can make friends like on the internet. I don't have to
Yeah.
accomplish real tasks in real life. I can just play video games. I don't have to necessarily work for something. I can just take credit and buy it. Like, everything is instant now.
Yeah.
And so the time and the failure that's going to, it doesn't make you a failure. Like, failure is an opportunity to learn and recognize where there's feedback that's necessary to make a more informed decision. But most people don't want to do that. But also, on the flip side to that, there's a real fear of success for people. Not because of, dude, it's not where I come from. And I can remember, man, when I hit my first like $10,000 month, which to some that will be like, whoa. And others that I'd be like, well, okay. But dude, I made 33 grand a year as a pastor.
Yeah.
And people like me who grew up in a trailer in rural Oklahoma don't make money. That's not what we do. We work hard and
Yeah.
we're blue collar. So even to become a pastor was a little bit of a misnomer for, again, quote unquote, people like me. Being an academic, uncommon for people like me. And to go now into business and to now be generating six figures, especially in Oklahoma, where, I mean, that is a healthy sum of income. I was I didn't celebrate in a way that was like, "Oh my gosh," it was, "Oh, all my friends are gonna think I think I'm better than them, and my family's gonna think I'm better than them, or they're gonna think I think that, and I don't want that, and money's like, am I gonna become is money the root of all evil? I don't know what to do with this." Like, everything just started spiraling, and I was so afraid of the success. And sometimes we're afraid of the success because, one, it separates us and we don't want to be separated. Two, because we've created assessments and judgments against ourselves based on how we've been raised. And so
Yeah.
we're afraid of who we have to become in the process. And so it's like, even now, so obviously the tables have turned and the tide has changed. Now, I sit on the board of 8 companies and I do a lot of things
Yeah.
now. And so now my mindset and my framing and my capacity is different. But it took leaning into not being afraid of who I would become, but now leaning into who must I become for this next venture to be true. So it's a shift. Everything that you believe has to shift.
Kind of taking it back to the initial thought with the free group, when did it become not just a free group, but a direct coaching platform? And why, like, obviously, you get to a point in business where you get sick and tired of handing things for free. Like, you need to make money, right? That's
Yeah,
why you live. It's hard to live off of $33,000 a year. But
sure.
when did that shift come, and what has come of that?
I started coaching outside of that group. That group just was what it was. And it was just a place
Organic.
for men to talk about, guy things, and
Okay.
to talk about matters of faith and spirituality and love and parenting and co parenting, physical health and emotional health, all the things.
Yeah.
And in the process, I was going through a lot of transition. Like, I did step out of ministry to step into coaching. I wanted to help. Originally, it was helping good men taking guns out of their mouths, but that was like a super weird URL and like would be
Yeah.
awful on a t-shirt. So it was helping good men become great. And I started working with guys and through a myriad of different, walks of life. And it was not super pricey. It was like, yeah, I think when I first started for 90 days working with me, it was like $4,500. Um, and that was all again through I had started being on podcasts in early 2017, haphazardly. That's a whole other story that people can look up. Um, but it wasn't glamorous. Like I was when started coaching, like I didn't have like 6 figures in 6 days story that like everybody likes to
Sure.
publicize. No 7 figures in 7 weeks. I was flipping hard. I've been a licensed mechanic for 20 something years. So I was flipping. I've been a licensed barber as well for that length of time. I was cutting hair out of my front room. I was flipping Harleys out of my garage. I was doing graphic design, building websites for local businesses and churches because I had done that in the church. Because when you're the young guy, you learn how to do everything. I was playing bars and private parties on the weekends that I didn't have my son and singing, doing that. But I made it work. And then from there, it just started gaining momentum. I started getting contracted to speak more, which opened up a pipeline for taking on clients. When I maxed out my capacity to take clients, I started raising my prices. And again, it was all personal development. I then started getting into the marketing and branding sector because I'd done it for so long in the church community. It all translated well. I started having organizations reach out asking if I would teach on leadership and culture. That's all I had done for 15 years was build infrastructure inside of churches that were anywhere from 800 to 5,000 people. And so I'm like, oh, this is so much easier because I don't have to bring faith into this. And I can tell you exactly what's wrong. I don't have to sugarcoat anything. I don't have to hold your hand through this. I can just tell you straight. This is so much better. Um, and as it turns out, I had a real like everything that I had learned and seasoned over those 13 years became instrumental in the transference of those skill sets into what I do now in the business vertical. And it it just started growing, and I got on more. I've been on again over 400 podcasts at this point, over 500 stages, and I'm the guy who does. We're going to turn on traffic just to see what happens, but I've not run any ads or anything else up to this point. Everything has been through other people's stages and referral. Through that, then the Facebook group grows and grows because it's in my bio. It gets locked. I get locked out of it. It gets temporarily frozen for I like being. I forget what they called it. Like potentially harmful, like hateful language and things like that. You can't talk about traditional masculinity without it being toxic, you know.
Yeah.
And so we got access again, and from that was earlier. That was like beginning of 2023, we got access again after like a year of being locked out of it. And so we rallied everybody inside. Everybody came back to life, and we've just been going hard at it ever since.
Yeah.
And that has parlayed into inviting people to join our mastermind and inviting people to join some of the other opportunities that we have. And it's been a really great resource pool. But also, again, the main intent for it was not to be like a driver for revenue. It was really just to have a safe space for guys. It's like, man, I love my faith. I cuss a little bit as well. I'm gonna be real. Like I'm not trying to be super like the perfect person. I'm trying to be the greatest version of me that I can be. I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. I want to be a great co-parent. I want to be a great business owner. I want to be a great employee if I'm an employee. I want to be in the best shape that I can be in because I don't want to disrespect my body because there are people who can't move theirs and they would give anything just to have one that works. So I'm not going to disrespect it. Um, I want to change some stories about what I think about money, about what I think about love, about even what I think about God and what I think about dads. And that's the journey we've been on.
So you made a post, and for anyone who doesn't follow him, everyone should go follow him. I think Instagram it's Cody_Jefferson. You made a post 2 or 3 days ago, which is kind of going to be a talking point that I think we're going to stay on for a minute.
Cool.
In business, as a successful business owner, they're like you got to measure KPIs,
Yep.
key performing indicators or performance indicators, and these KPIs are what help you understand profitability metrics, percentages, cost per clicks, help you understand how quickly you're helping clients or what your client turnover rate is. Like all of these things are very important to understand as a business owner. However, and I think your post was very accurate. You're not necessarily on all these advisory seats that you have in the different businesses that you're a part of. I wouldn't now don't take this as a dig. I wouldn't say you're not an advisor who's helping on the numbers side of things or the operations side of things. You are very much so worrying about a few different KPIs. And your post literally says in the game of ventures, I lead the conversation in maximizing three of the most undervalued KPIs in the market: peace, fulfillment, and competence. Why do you choose why did you choose those? I would say there are more KPIs than that you cover, but why did you choose those three KPIs: peace, fulfillment, and
Because I find those are the ones that drive the rest of the conversations moving forward. So typically businesses don't have problems, not ones that can't be solved very, very quickly and
sure,
with very little headache. And so in the game of business, I am a part of mediating those conversations when it comes to those other metrics. So when we're looking at numbers, when we're trying to discern what is and isn't working through the growth or the scale process, I am a part of those conversations. And one of those conversations is mitigating the emotional tension. And we can mitigate the emotional tension when we build confidence. And so confidence is built by keeping your word to yourself and being the person that you say that you are, by setting incrementally harder tasks every single day that confirm that identity. In doing so, you trust yourself more. And in doing so, you trust your decision making more. And in that, other people trust you more as well. When you find that other people are committed to their confidence as well and to keeping their word to themselves, you tend to trust them more. So now we have a board, we have an institution, we have a team of C-level executives who are all operating on all cylinders, who have the utmost confidence because they're keeping their word to themselves, right? And their word to those that they give their word to. And so now we can make decisions not based on anyone's ego, because ego is the opposite of confidence. It's been said, Richard Rohr said that true contentment is when there's nothing to prove, hide, or protect. Those are the three key KPIs of the ego. And so often when we have problems in business, it's ego playing out against each other. So we can remove that and we can find solutions more effectively because we mitigate that emotional tension. We're not married to ideas. We're not married to tactics. We're not married to strategies, right? We're focused on outcomes, and those outcomes don't lie. So there's the confidence part. Did you want to say something?
sorry.
Looked like you did.
Yeah, well, no, I was just going to say earlier you'd made the comment about how when you transitioned from being in ministry to being in business, that you were like God was kind of taken out of the business aspect, so you could be a little bit more clear cut and you could be a little bit more defined.
Right.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, in your opinion?
So I think that, well, I don't know how spiritual you want me to get in this, but I don't believe that there's anywhere that we exist that God
As
does not, because
spiritual
God
as
is
you want to
omnipresent.
get.
You know what I mean? How spiritual are you gonna get? I don't believe there's anywhere that we can go that God does not exist, right? The psalmist says, like, where can I go
Sure.
that you are not there? Right? From highs to highs, to lows to lows, even though I make my bed in shale. So my frame and worldview as that God is in everything. And so God has given us a discernment and a level of intelligence and capacity. Now, what we do with that is up to us. Right. So often we pray for the miracle of God to get us across an ocean. When he's like, yeah, but I've already taught you to build a boat. There's a bunch of wood over there. Get to building.
Yeah.
Right. So often we want to use that as a scapegoat that God didn't show up, didn't provide, didn't see it through, when really we didn't actually exercise our full capacity and we got too emotional in the conversation. So again, I believe that God is in everything, but I for the conversation of business metrics and KPI, that's not a God conversation.
Sure.
Right. So I don't think it's like it's simpler for me because again, in the game of church, which is a nonprofit business these days, um, you're answering a different set of KPIs. Right. And so why I think it's healthier is this is not an indictment on all churches, but having been involved in churches all over the country, I will say that we utilize business KPI and strategy and we wrap it with a Jesus bow and say it's all for him. When so often that is not the case. And so it creates a real discrepancy and a rub against ethics. And again, you can be honest with yourself and still not be telling the truth. And you
Sure.
can only be aware to what you're aware of. But as somebody objective who has been in many meetings aside of church institutions, like, no, these are just business conversations, and you just put a Jesus stamp on it. We're still talking about front end. We're still talking about backdoor. We're still talking about profitability. We're still talking about the numbers that need to come in. We're still talking about operating expenses. We're still talking about staff turnover. We're still talking about all of the conversations that happen inside of a business. You just put a Jesus stamp on it and say it's all for him. I don't know that God ever asked us for any of that. Be very careful what you say God asked us for. Very careful with that conversation.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is like, oh, cool. We're not trying to mask this as anything. This
Yeah,
is just business.
let's call a
This is
spade a
great.
spade. This is what it is.
Let's just call a
Yeah.
spade a spade. And now we can just get down to brass tacks. And I don't have to worry about offending you. I don't have to worry about coming against what you feel your call of God is in this conversation. We don't have to come against that ego of your call. This is simply business.
Here are
No
the
emotions
facts of the
required.
situation. Yep, let's talk
Yeah,
about the
we
facts
have
and
feelings, we have
yep.
facts, right? You will know a tree by its fruit. We're gonna look at the fruit. I don't care how you feel about the fruit. We're just gonna look at the fruit. Because in the church world, so much revolves around feelings and emotional experience because
Yeah.
we've equated faith, especially in the charismatic evangelical church, we've equated that with emotional, emotive experience. That's in business. No, we're just talking metrics. We don't need the emotion inside of it. Now we can get
Numeros. We're
excited.
talking numeros.
Yeah, we can get excited and listen. Everything that every business that I'm a part of is for a purpose. Like we are driving towards initiatives that cultivate real change in the world and in marketplace. So I believe that having a mission-minded organization is always going to outperform because you're driving towards something bigger than yourself.
So what gets in the way of that though with business owners? Like why is it so hard to come back to that facts over feelings conversation, or like why do egos or why do emotions get such in the way of business owners?
We don't want to fail.
Is that what it is?
We don't want to. It's that we
Is that
don't
what
want
it
to
is?
fail. It's that we don't want to like. I think there's a perception that we don't like. The hard part about business, especially today, and this is true for really, and this is true for relationships, true for everything. We're always pitted against what we see front facing, and so there's like, and everybody's bigger than they actually are.
Yeah.
And so, if that's the case, it creates such a discrepancy between where you say you are and where you actually are. And so you're constantly playing catch up to the idea and the persona that you portray. This is why I say, like, I'm the wealthiest guy in the room. I'm the richest guy in the room. It's not because I make more money than anybody. I have people that
Yeah.
make way more money than me. It's because I have peace. Because like it's like the philosopher Popeye said, I am what I am, and that's all that I am. Everybody asks, like, where did you get the phrase, this is who I am, so this is what I do? Jesus, but two, Popeye. That's it.
Oh,
So if
that's
we can
hilarious.
find peace and alignment in creating healthy margin, healthy expectations, appropriate boundaries, we build confidence through doing the things that we say that we're going to do on a daily basis, right? So much of what I do inside of infrastructure of business is really walking with executives and walking with core teams in ensuring that we are who we say we are and that you're fulfilling on your daily priorities, both professionally, personally, spiritually, intimately, like across the board, because we set the standard. And every day you're setting a standard. And it may not be the standard that you want to set, but you're setting it regardless. So we're going to set that KPI to where we are this is the baseline of what's expected, right? And if that's the case, now we remove some of that and we mitigate some of that emotional tension.
So fulfillment, like I think you kind of hit it on the head, but we circumvented to go back to peace. The fulfillment side of things as an entrepreneur is sometimes difficult because
Mhm.
I struggle with this as well. Like business is going really good, but the the satisfaction versus the contentment sometimes I think gets in the head of a lot of business owners to where they don't want to, how do I put this? They don't want to perceive contentment. Like no one really wants to be content. At least a lot of the people that are working at a higher level, they don't want to be content. There's always something greater or better,
Mhm.
more money ahead kind of deal.
Well, but you can
What
be content without being complacent.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm just saying for
Mhm.
those listening, like where does that fulfillment come into play? And what kind of fulfillment are you talking about when you make your post? Is that a monetary fulfillment? Is that a fulfillment based on circumstances? Is that just a general happiness that like obviously I think I already know where you're going to go with this, but I'm just like this is something that we talk about twice a week, right? But
Sure.
for just the general person, this fulfillment, is that something that is transactional, or is that something that they find in the things that they do day to day?
Yeah. So fulfillment to me, for the men that I walk with, is in knowing who it is that you are, knowing who it is that you're becoming, and holding yourself to those standards on a daily basis and doing the things that you say that you're going to do. Period. Period. And so we talk about, and we're good at this, compartmentalizing things. And in some ways, I think that that can be useful for sure. Specifically when we're in real life scenarios of trauma or we're in high pressure scenarios, being able to mitigate emotional frustration, to be able to make a very concise decision and to be able to compartmentalize, that's useful, but not in the conversation of what we do as business owners and founders. We're taught like, just shut it off, just shut it off. You will never shut it off. You can't. You can't. I don't care anybody who tells you that you can and you believe them. I have some magic beans I would like to sell you as well, because it just doesn't happen. We don't shut it off. And so that creates this real friction that we need to be somewhere else. We need to be doing something else. We should just be present. It creates this self frustration that we're just not doing things right. So we add more habits to like, I just need to meditate more, maybe because they say I got to create space. No, maybe I need to read more. No, I mean, I need to cold plunge because that'll shock my system. And then everything's less stressful. That's what they say, right? No, I need a liver. I need to eat liver. That's what it is. Like we got all these things, but fulfillment is recognizing that for people like us, this is not most people. If you're listening to this podcast, you need to come to terms that you're wired differently. We're weird, dude. Who chooses to go out on their own and do something? Like it's so absurd. The amount of risk that you take on, the stress that you put yourself under. And it's a gift because we choose it. So recognizing that there is nothing to shut off, that it's fully integrated, but that there are boundaries that you can put in place. So fulfillment for me is, am I as present as a dad, as a partner, as a chaperone at the school, as I am for this conversation, as I am for a board meeting, as I am when I'm on stage speaking? Am I as present for myself when I'm in quiet time, when I'm at the gym? Am I as present and aware when I'm putting things inside of my body, like what I'm eating and what I drink? Am I as present in my personal devotion time with God? Because that's important to me. Like, am I who I say I am? Fulfillment is nothing like it's kind of like purpose. I think we have created the church has done a really good job and personal development has done a really good job of creating a sellable commodity out of two things that are not like you don't find
That
your
should be
purpose.
natural.
Yeah, you don't ever find your purpose. Just going to let you know. Sorry, purpose driven, all the things. You can buy a bunch of books on it. You can, Lord, you can buy a lot of books on it. There's no book that's going to lead you to your purpose. I don't care how many forms you fill out. I don't care how cool the workbook is. It's not like there's going to be an internal consternation because there's going to be a gap that exists that you have to close, whether that be a skills gap, a time gap, relationship gap, a money gap, a mindset gap. There's a gap. And so purpose is found now. You create it.
And I think, and it's ongoing.
Same with
That
fulfillment.
per that
And when you
that purpose
create
always
purpose
changes.
every day, always, dude. And so creating like fulfillment is found in creating purpose every single day.
Mhm.
And it's as much in a conversation that we're having now as it will be when I go pick up kids in 30 minutes, as it will be when Sarah and I go for a walk while kids are playing baseball because we got practice tonight, as it will be when we have family supper or dinner, wherever you're from. Um, it's all there. And fulfillment is recognizing the gift that you're alive and present for all of it. It's all a gift. The love, the loss, the experience, the trauma, the tragedy, the triumph. It's all seasoning a particular grace that only the experience of this life can cultivate.
Well, we were talking 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about a lot of macro problems. Um, and I saw another post today by another individual, Tanner Chittister, who I think you know,
Yeah.
and he was talking about coaches in the aspect of like, I'll use this analogy because I think it makes sense in my head. He was talking about how coaches nowadays, or gurus, will tell you that you have to be is like you have to create some authentic and weird name, like I am a tax advisor. But in my space, people make up I am a tax strategist. I am a no, you're a
Right.
tax advisor, right?
Yeah.
And I think people now, because of, and maybe you could accredit this to social media, maybe you could accredit it to just the simplicity of maybe what life is right now. But I think things are so simple to where people have to they have to find things to complicate their lives with because they feel like the complication is what will allow them to grow. That if they complicate it or do one more thing that is hard, then I'm going to become better in some way, shape, or form. But I think if people were to take a step back and just go through their general life, like there would already be things that are hard. There's no reason to make it harder for yourself.
Yeah, it's a very interesting proposition, the way that we create the idea of suffering around what should be very normal baseline habits, right?
Yeah.
So, again, this is why we go back to the this is who I am, so this is what I do, right? I don't go to the gym in the morning to like quote unquote silence an inner bitch or to I'm sorry if right, anyone listening just beep that. Or
Okay.
I don't do it to like do hard things or because I do work and I pay dues. The only dues I'm paying are about $150 a month to a really posh gym that I get to go train at every morning. That's the only
Oh,
dues I'm paying, and that's like and the people
yeah.
that propagate this message are literally training
I
in
don't
$250,000 gyms that they bought that they've made for themselves. I'm like,
I don't
"You're not
owe that
paying
to
dues."
anyone. Yeah, you don't owe that to
Like,
anyone.
there's no dues paid. You're literally
No,
doing the baseline, and I'll just speak to the men right now. You're literally doing the baseline of taking care of your body, not putting trash in it, and not being disrespectful to the one vessel that you have to change this world in, which starts in your home. You are you are choosing to not be disrespectful, overweight, lethargic, purposeless, apathetic, lazy, entitled, and letting that be the model to your children while telling them you can be anything that you want in this life. Oh yeah, dad, then why aren't you? No, you're literally doing the bare minimum by taking care of your body, by pushing and pulling heavy things, because we live in a culture and in an age where everything is simple and everything is easy. And we don't live in an infrastructure where we need to push and pull heavy things. Industrial revolution took care of all of that. And industrial farming has removed a lot of that need. And so you're just taking care of your body. Heaven forbid you break a sweat. Wow. Let me give you a participation trophy in what it is to be a man. You really outdid yourself. So silly, right? It's the same way with we imagine that life is so good and we have so little real problems because of the prosperity that we've cultivated over the past 150 years that we now have to create arguments with each other about identity, about biology. We have to manufacture problems that never existed before to give ourselves something to arbitrarily fight for. And we will spend our entire lives fighting battles that have no eternal consequence just to prove that we were right about something that doesn't actually matter or exist.
Okay, I want to touch on this for just a minute because this is actually a conversation that I had with my mother not too long ago. We were talking about I am a very opinionated person, and sometimes I have to kind of channel that.
Same.
Again, going back to our conversation, going back to our conversation 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the changes in currency and and inflation and what Ukraine and Russia are doing and what China and Brazil are doing with coins, and we were talking about all of these school shootings and this, that, or the other, and I always come back to the fact that the only thing that I can truly control is my household,
That's
right?
it.
So how much energy should one give, or is it worth to give to those outside factors, like you just mentioned? Besides the part about how men are just lazy, because I completely agree with that for the most part.
Mhm.
How much energy should be given to some of that outside stuff?
Well, again, there's the peace conversation, right? How much peace do you want to give away to things that you have no control over? And, in the book, Loving What Is, Byron Katie has you consider that there are three businesses. There's your business, there's someone else's business, and there's God's business. But you can only ever be in one of them. And so if you're trying to wonder and contend with what's going on in the world and are we going to be okay and is the sky going to fall and da 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 da, that's God's business, at least from my tradition and what I believe. Your mileage may vary. That's totally fine. The conversions I worry about now are a little bit different, a little more monetary. I got out of the soul conversion game. I just say, look at the fruit. If the fruit of my life proves interesting, we can have a conversation. So there's God's business. Now, there's things that you're doing. And if there's accountability between us and you've asked for that accountability, then it's my responsibility as your brother, as your mentor, as your business partner, as whoever, right? To now be in your business when appropriate to hold you to the accountability and the standard that you've set for yourself. But when I'm in your business, I can't be in my own because I'm in yours.
Yeah.
So God's business, others' business, your business. I choose to stay in my business. That's how I keep my peace. Doesn't mean that I don't pay attention. Doesn't mean that I'm not aware. I just also recognize that, again, you can create anxiety and overwhelm around things that there you will
Can't
not be able to
control.
control. No. But it also it gives people a sense of permission to not move forward. Again, there's the fear. Remember, everything comes back to fear. If
Yeah.
I can be afraid of all of these things, it doesn't matter whether I control them or not. I can utilize that fear to justify why I don't move forward.
talked about kind of the anxiety. I have a couple of people that are really close to me who do struggle with anxiety and depression
Mhm.
in a very real sense. I'm going to say this unapologetically. I think 75% of the anxiety and depression is somewhat self-manifested or made up, in my opinion. But I think there are people who struggle really greatly with anxiety and depression. I have a couple of people
Sure.
like that, and part of it, I look at it and I think you said, why are you worrying about something you can't control? Like, what is that doing to your energy and your time frame? And I know we like went off the topic of business, but I think just in business general, you have a lot of people right now who, again, are trying to worry about things that you have no control over. So focus
Sure.
on your individual KPIs, focus on your individual business, and you'll start to see the fruits of that labor. So
Yeah. And remember that we're always either expanding or contracting.
yeah,
There's not really a middle ground. And so one of the things that we know when markets shift and we go through like quote unquote uncertain times, the majority of people contract. We know that people pull back, get very, very conservative. Spending and buying habits change. Um, Ironically, poor people spend more money to buy things they can't afford because they think if I can just hold on to these things, I'll at least have those things. And business owners often get fearful because market shifts and maybe again buying instincts and patterns change, and instead of looking at what the market is leaning toward and how their buyer is maybe becoming more sophisticated or is afraid and how to speak into those fears, they contract. So they pull back their spend, they lay off employees, and they shrink and they go backwards. But I'd
yeah,
have you consider that in the midst of all of that, it creates a space that is now no longer occupied for expansion. Like we're going into quote unquote uncertain times, and I'm turning on ads like for the first time
yeah.
because I'm like, bro, people are pulling back. That means that like we're going to be able to like for pennies on the dollar, we're going to be able to command market share. Let's
Mhm.
go. Like now that we have the reserves, we were ready for the storm.
Yeah.
Now let's deploy. So this is also a conversation of good stewardship and being responsible within the infrastructure of your business to recognize, and people, we've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, like, hey, get your house in order, get your business in order, because there's going to become a season where it's either going to take some people out financially because you're not ready for it, but it's also going to be one of the greater opportunities to scoop up businesses and properties
So
and add market share and all these things. So you can be afraid. That's okay. Listen, I'm a dad. There are nights at 2 a.m. where I wake up and I'm like, I, d- I, w- I can't control it, but it doesn't mean that I'm not still human. I don't still think about what is going to happen to my kid.
yeah.
If I create all this opportunity and all this, but it still gets a switch gets shut off and none of it matters anymore. Like, what happens to him? Like, is he gonna be
How will he
okay?
grow up, or what's the world gonna be like when he's
What's
not?
gonna happen? And
Yeah.
none of us know. So all I can do is put my faith in something that is bigger than me because that's my tradition, that's my worldview.
Sure.
But then also recognize that in this season, so let's take it very practically. In this season, do I want to be the dad that shows my son that he retracted or he expanded in the midst of very uncertain, stress-filled times for most people? How did dad show up? Because more than what I can say to him, how I operate in integrity and in endurance through this season that is coming will speak more to him than any other words that I could tell him.
I always kind of say that I never want my boys to have to look farther than the front porch to look at a hero, and that like I think that kind of
That's it,
highlights it
man.
really
That's it.
good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I kind of take to heart and want to do. We only have a minute or two left. What's on your horizon? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do with Embrace the Lion with Roundtable? With I know you
Yeah.
talked about turning on ad spend. What
Yeah.
what are you looking forward to for the next 12 to 18 months?
Walking with more men in these kinds of conversations, more business owners. So we're opening roundtable up to more men. Um, that's why we're turning on ads, not just for that, but really just to propagate a message of hope. Um, r- Reality for sure, right? Because I'm like that good mixture of like Sour Patch Kid, you know what I mean? Like I'm kind, but I'm also going to kick you in the teeth with the truth.
Yeah,
And and so getting the message out, being able to offer tactical and practical, like like again, like even in our website, like I'm really excited. We're coming out with all of these tests and quizzes and free content to try and help as many people move forward that maybe are where I was 6 years ago. So you're not in the place where you're gonna be able to invest with me in any like real capacity, but
sure.
we can get you there.
Yeah.
And going deeper with our guys inside of our free community. I want to see that at like 10,000 guys by the end of the year. That's a goal. And I think one of the things that creates frustration for us is we get too attached to the dopamine, just to piggyback off the goal setting. We get too attached to the dopamine that comes from goal setting. And we put a period at that goal when really it's just a comma. It's not a finish line, it's just a checkpoint. And it's true in every area of life. You don't just lose 20
Yeah.
pounds and it just stays off. Like you have to maintain the identity of an athlete. And so for me, really who I become in the journey, who I become in the process, right? I got 5 years until my son's a teenager and knows everything. So, like, my 5 year plan is to just pour into this kid as much as possible and to be as present for him and his class and for my family and for his teams as much as I can. And to really show these young men what's possible and to show them what it is to uh, have it all is such an arbitrary, like weird thing to say, but to be fully integrated in life and faith and fitness and family and to have financial prosperity and to show
To be
a
fulfilled.
different way yeah, fulfillment that doesn't require sacrificing your soul on the altar of that success.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's good. Uh, no one will see it because you're wearing a hat, but I mean, he's doing all this, and I don't know that he has many gray hairs if at all. If he does, he dyes his hair. So
No,
hats
dude,
off to
listen,
you.
man, on the sides, look, you can see it right there, dude. Look at that.
Oh, it is
I got,
coming in.
bro,
You
it's
need to
because my hair's usually short.
quit
When it
working
gets
so hard.
longer, now that it's getting longer, it's like, dude, I didn't realize I had so much gray hair. I like it. It's a seasoning, man. It's a
Oh,
season
the-
because I already look
it's just
young.
a
Like I
comma.
can't.
It's a comma.
It's a comma, dude. On to the next season. 40s. The 40s
Oh,
are the years of seasoning. So
this this was fantastic. If you are interested, obviously a lot of your groups are garnered towards men. I think
yes,
between the two of us, there's a couple different connections we have. If there are any of our lady counterparts who are looking for groups like this,
absolutely. Yeah,
but yeah, on Facebook, Embrace the Lion. Like I mentioned before, another great opportunity. I can promise you that the free content is good. The paid content is even better. So if you're interested in Roundtable, again, go to Instagram, Cody_Jefferson, and I know you can reach him out there. Any last departing words? Anything else you'd like to say before we head off?
I'm grateful for who you are.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm proud of you.
No, this again, great conversations. It's always good with you. I enjoy your time. I enjoy the friendship.
Yep.
As you can tell, we do very little slacking off here at Slacking Off. Thanks for joining in, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Slackin' Off with Brady Slack.